We now must come to the statement. Secretary of State for Works and Pensions, Liz Kendall.
Mr Speaker, this government is ambitious for our people and our country, and we believe that unleashing the talents of the British people is the key to our future success. But the social security system we inherited from the Conservatives is failing the very people it is supposed to help and holding our country back. The facts speak for themselves. 1 in 10 people of working age now claiming a sickness or disability benefit. Almost 1 million young people not in education, employment or training. That's 1 in 8 of all our young people. 2.8 million out of work due to long-term sickness. And the number of people claiming personal independence payments set to double this decade from 2 to 4.3 million, with the growth in claims rising faster among young people and mental health conditions, and with claims up to 4 times higher in parts of the Midlands, Wales and the North, where economic demand is weakest, places that were decimated in the 80s and 90s, written off for years by successive Tory governments and never given the chances they deserve. And the consequences of this failure are there for all to see. Millions of people who could work, trapped on benefits, denied the income, hope, dignity and self-respect that we know good work brings. And taxpayers paying millions more on the costs of failure, with spending on working age sickness and disability benefits up 20 billion since the pandemic, set to rise by a further 18 billion by the end of this Parliament to £70 billion a year. And it is not like this in most other comparable countries, where spending on these benefits since the pandemic is either stable or falling, whilst ours continues to inexorably rise. This is the legacy of 14 years of Tory failure. And today, Mr Speaker, we say no more. Since we were elected, we have hit the ground running to get more people into good work through our plan for change. We're investing an extra £26 billion into the NHS to drive down waiting lists and get people back to health and back to work. We're improving the quality of work and making work pay with our landmark employment rights legislation and increases in the national living wage. We're creating more good jobs in every part of the country, in clean energy and through our modern industrial strategy. And we are introducing the biggest reforms to employment support in a generation with our £240 million Get Britain Working plan. Today, our Pathways to Work Green Paper sets out decisive action to fix the broken benefits system, creating a more proactive, pro-work system for those who can work, and so we protect it for those who cannot work now and for the long term. Mr Speaker, I know as a constituency MP for 14 years that there will always be people who can never work because of the severity of their disability or illness. Under this government, the social security system will always be there for people in genuine need. That is a principle we will never compromise on. But disabled people and people with health conditions who can work should have the same rights, choices and chances to work as everybody else. That principle of equality is vital too, because far from what members opposite would have you believe, many sick and disabled people want to work with the right help and support. And unlike the Conservatives, that is what we will deliver. Mr Speaker, our first aim is to secure a decisive shift towards prevention and early intervention. Almost 4 million people are in work with a work-limiting health condition, and around 300,000 fall out of work every year. So we've got to do far more to help people stay in work and get back to work quickly, because your chances of returning are 5 times higher in the first year. Our plans to give statutory sick pay for 1 million of the lowest paid workers and more rights to flexible working will help keep more people in work. The Workwell programme is trialling new approaches, like GPs referring people to employment advisors instead of signing them off sick. And our Keep Britain Working review, led by former John Lewis boss Sir Charlie Mayfield, will set out what government and employers can do together to create healthier, more inclusive workplaces. So we help more employers offer opportunities for disabled people, including through measures like reasonable adjustments, alongside our Green Paper consultation on reforming access to work so it is fit for the future. And today, I can announce another step. Our Green Paper will consult on a major reform of contributory benefits, merging contributions-based job seekers allowance and employment support allowance into a new time-limited unemployment insurance paid at a higher rate without having to prove you cannot work in order to get it. So if you have paid into the system, you'll get stronger income protection while we help you get back on track. Yeah. Our second objective is to restore trust and fairness in the benefits system by fixing the broken assessment process and tackling the perverse incentives that drive people into welfare dependency. Now, members on this side of the House have long argued that the work capability assessment is not fit for purpose. Going through the WCA is complex, time-consuming and often stressful for claimants, especially if they also have to go through the PIP assessment. And more fundamentally, it's based on a binary can-can't work divide, when we know the truth is that many people's physical and mental health conditions fluctuate. The consultation on the Conservatives' discredited WCA proposals was ruled unlawful by the courts. So today I can announce we will not go ahead with their proposals. Instead, we will scrap the WCA in 2028. In future, extra financial support for health conditions in universal credit will be available solely through the PIP assessment. So extra income is based on the impact of someone's health condition or disability, not on their capacity to work, reducing the number of assessments that people have to go through, and a vital step towards de-risking work. And, Mr. Speaker, we will do more by legislating for a right to try, guaranteeing that work in and of itself will never lead to a benefit reassessment, giving people the confidence to take the plunge and try work without the fear this will put their benefits at risk. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, we will also tackle the perverse financial incentives that the party opposite created, which actively encourage people into welfare dependency. Yeah. The Tories ran down the value of the Universal Credit Standard Allowance. As a result, the health top-up is now worth double the standard allowance at more than £400 a month. And in 2017, they took away extra financial help for the group of people who could prepare for work. So we're left with a binary assessment of can or can't work and a clear financial incentive to define yourself as incapable of work, something the OBR, IFS and others say is a likely factor driving people onto incapacity benefits. Today, we tackle this problem head-on. We will legislate to rebalance the payments in universal credit from April next year, holding the value of the health top-up fixed in cash terms for existing claimants and reducing it for new claimants, with an additional premium for people with severe lifelong conditions that mean that they will never work, to give them the financial security they deserve. Yeah. And alongside this, Mr. Speaker, we will bring in a permanent above-inflation rise to the standard allowance in universal credit for the first time ever. Yeah. A £775 annual increase in cash terms by 2029-30 and a decisive step to tackle the perverse incentives in the system. We will also fix the failing system of reassessments. The Conservatives failed to switch reassessments back on after the pandemic, so they're down by more than 2/3, with face-to-face assessments going from 7 in 10 to only 1 in 10. We will turn these reassessments back on at scale and shift the focus back to doing more face-to-face, and we will ensure they are recorded as standard to give confidence to claimants and taxpayers that they're being done properly. And, Mr. Speaker, I can also announce for people on universal credit with the most severe disabilities and health conditions that will never improve, we want to ensure that they are never reassessed to give them the confidence and dignity they deserve. And we will fundamentally overhaul the DWP's safeguarding approach to make sure all our processes and training are of the highest quality so we protect and support the most vulnerable people. Mr. Speaker, alongside these changes, we will also reform disability benefits so they focus support on those in greatest need and to ensure the social security system lasts for the long term into the future. Social and demographic change means more people are now living with a disability. But the increase in disability benefits is double the rate of increasing prevalence of working-age disability in the country, with claims amongst young people up 150%, for mental health conditions up 190%, and claims for learning difficulties up over 400%, according to the IFS. Every day, there are more than 1,000 new PIP awards. That's the equivalent of adding a population the size of Leicester every single year. Mr. Speaker, that is not sustainable long-term, above all for the people who depend on this support. But the Tories have no proper plan to deal with this, just yet more ill-thought-through consultations. So today I can announce this government will not bring in the Tory proposals for vouchers, because disabled people should have choice and control over their lives. We will not means test PIP, because disabled people deserve extra support, whatever their incomes. And, Mr. Speaker, I can confirm we will not freeze PIP either. Instead, our reforms will focus support on those with the greatest needs. We will legislate for a change in PIP so people will need to score a minimum of 4 points in at least one activity to qualify for the daily living element of PIP from November 2026. This will not affect the mobility component of PIP and only relates to the daily living element. And alongside this, we will launch a review of the PIP assessment, led by my right honourable friend, the Minister for Social Security and Disability, in close consultation with disabled people, the organisations that represent them, and other experts. So we make sure PIP and the assessment process is fit for purpose now and into the future. And, Mr. Speaker, this is a significant reform package that is expected to save over £5 billion in 2029-30, and the OBR will set out their final assessment of the costings next week. Our third and final objective is to deliver personalised support to sick and disabled people who can work to get the jobs they need and deserve. We know from the last Labour government and our new deals for disabled people, young people and the long-term unemployed, the difference that proper employment support can make. And more recent evidence from the Work Choice programme and additional work coach time shows support can make a significant difference in the number of people getting work, keeping work and improving their mental health and well-being too. This Labour government believes that an active state can transform people's lives. We know this because we have done it before. So today I can announce we will invest an additional £1 billion a year for employment support with the aim of guaranteeing high-quality, tailored and personalised support to help people on a pathway to work. The largest ever investment in opportunities to work for sick and disabled people. And alongside this, for those on the UC Health top-up, we will bring in an expectation to engage and a new support conversation to talk about people's goals and aspirations, combined with an offer of personalised health skills and employment support. And because being out of work or training when you're young is so damaging for your future prospects, we will go further. In addition to funding our youth guarantee through the £240 million Get Britain working plan, we will consult on delaying access to the health top-up in universal credit until someone is aged 22, with the savings reinvested into work support and training opportunities, so every young person is earning or learning and on a pathway to success. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives left a broken benefits system that's failing the people who depend on it and our country as a whole. The status quo is unacceptable, but it is not inevitable. We were elected on a mandate for change, to end the sticking plaster approach and tackle the root causes of problems in this country that have been ignored for too long. Because we believe in the value and potential of every single person, that we all have something positive to contribute and can make a difference, whether that's in paid work, in our families or communities, alongside our neighbours and friends. We will unleash this potential in every corner of the land, because we are as ambitious for the British people as they are for themselves. Today we take decisive action, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State, Helen Whately.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the Right Honourable Lady for advance sight of her statement. She and I agree on one thing. The welfare bill is too high. Left unchecked, it will rise to £100 billion by the end of the decade. Spending more on sickness benefits than we do on defence is not the sign of a strong country. And this isn't just a question of money. We have 3 million working-age people not working due to ill health, not filling the roles businesses need, not contributing to our economy, not fulfilling their own potential. Now, the best way to get the welfare bill down is to get people off benefits and into work. That is what we did year after year after taking office in 2010. Despite the once-in-a-century pandemic, there were 4 million more people in employment when we left office than the mess we inherited from Labour. Before the pandemic, economic inactivity was at a historic low. But it's true that then we started to see a new phenomenon: growing numbers of people claiming sickness benefits, and particularly worryingly, young people. A system set up with good intentions to protect the most vulnerable in society had over time morphed into something broader, driven in part by a well-intentioned but not always helpful medicalisation of life's ups and downs. In government, we identified this problem. We worked up plans to tackle it, but at every point, Labour opposed them. In fact, the Chancellor said that not one single penny could be saved from benefits. So when they came into office, not only did they cancel or delay pretty much everything we handed over, they had no plans of their own. They walked into the department with empty notebooks. All they'd done in opposition is oppose, instead of the hard work of coming up with their own answers. That's why the country has had to wait another 8 months for this announcement. And in that time, taxpayers have shelled out £7 billion in extra sickness benefits. Nearly 500,000 people have been signed off sick. In fact, 60 people were signed on to sickness benefits while the Right Honourable Lady was talking. Nonetheless, I have been looking forward to hearing what she would announce today, and which of the many things briefed out to the media her spinning policy wheel would eventually land on. Governing is hard. We know that. In the last few weeks, they have made it look really hard. But nothing compared to how hard life can be for a severely disabled person. Somebody for whom getting up, getting dressed, getting breakfast, things most of us here found easy to do this morning, they find hard, if not impossible. For some people, the last few weeks has been deeply frightening. They will be glad for the uncertainty to finally be at an end. Mr. Speaker, I can genuinely say that I want the Right Honourable Lady to succeed, and I welcome her commitment today to increase the number of reassessments and that more of these will be taking place face-to-face and recorded. I welcome the investment in employment support for disabled people. And of course, I welcome her re-announcing a host of things that we were doing in government. Scrapping the work capability assessment and creating a single assessment. That is already government policy, due to come in 2026-27. Her big idea seems to be to delay this until 2028. Merging New Style JSA and ESA into a new time-limited higher rate, a proposal we worked up in government. Tightening up eligibility for PIP, a consultation we launched, and by the way, would have gone much further on. Ending reassessments for people whose health conditions won't improve, we consulted on. Their right to try guarantee sounds remarkably similar to our chance to work guarantee. And of course, her continued support for Workwell, a programme I launched with the now Shadow Chancellor. In fact, the only original idea I can see in their entire announcement is increasing the rate of unemployment benefits. A Labour policy, if ever I heard one. Mr. Speaker, this is a now or never chance to seize the moment, a now or never for millions of people who will otherwise be signed off for what could end up being a lifetime on benefits. But this announcement today leaves me with more questions than answers. How many people will this help back into work? By when? Surely we haven't been waiting 8 months just for another green paper. Where is the fit note reform crucial to stem the flow of people onto benefits? Where is the action on people being signed off sick for the everyday ups and downs of life? Why is she only planning to save £5 billion when the bill is forecast to rise to over £100 billion? And do the savings she's announcing today include the £5 billion savings we had already agreed with the OBR for reforming the work capability assessment? Because if so, she has made virtually no savings of her own. What is the saving net of the additional expenditure planned? Fundamentally, this is too little, too late. The fact is, £5 billion. The fact is, £5 billion just doesn't cut it with a bill so big going up so fast. She needed to be tougher. She should be saying, no more hard-working taxpayers funding the family next door not to work. No more free top-of-the-range cars for people who don't need them. No more sickfluencers helping people to claim money they don't need. And now, before the Right Honourable Lady puts on her angry voice and leans across the dispatch box to shout at me about 14 years, can I gently say to her that everybody in this chamber and around the country knows that we lost and they won, and now her job is to govern, and it is my job to hold her to account. Our country needs everybody who can work to work. This principle should be at the heart of our welfare system. It is good for the taxpayer, good for the economy, good for the individual and their family who benefit from the security, dignity and purpose that work brings. And it means that those who genuinely cannot work get the support they deserve. But the fact is, fewer people work under Labour. It's happened every time they've been in office, and it's already happening now. They should have taken their time in opposition to come up with some meaningful reforms. They didn't, and the country is already paying the price.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, I personally like the Honourable Lady a great deal, but her entire response seemed to be railing against her own party's failings and lamenting action her party itself failed to take. Too little, too late. It indeed will be the epitaph of the Conservative Party. One thing I do agree with is that this is a now or never moment, and I'm proud that this government is taking it, taking decisive action, ducking the challenges that have been ignored for too long. And also, I would say, Mr. Speaker, I'm not interested in being tough. This is about real people with real lives, and we have to be careful how we talk about this. I'm interested in taking the right steps to actually change the system, to transform people's lives, and crucially, to ensure that we have a social security system that lasts in future. 1 in 3 of us will have a health condition in our lifetimes. 1 in 4 of us is disabled. And unless we as a country in the welfare state, the world of work and all of our public service wake up to that fact, that welfare state that the Labour Party created will not be there for future generations, as that is what we are determined to secure. This is a substantial package of measures that will save around £5 billion by 29-30. We will have to wait till the OBR comes up with its final costings on all of this at the spring statement. But I would just leave honourable members with this. The former Chancellor George Osborne said a decade ago, governments let unemployed people get parked on disability benefits and told they would never work again. Why? Because people on disability benefits don't get counted in unemployment figures that could embarrass politicians. The Labour Party isn't embarrassed about this situation. We're ashamed of the state the Tories left the country in. We will face up to our responsibilities. It's time honourable members opposite did the same.
Chair of the Select Committee, Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for her statement. I absolutely agree. Our social security system isn't fit for purpose, and I think the measures, particularly in terms of increasing employment support by £1 billion a year, by increasing the standard allowance of universal credit, something unfortunately the opposition failed to do when they were in government, will be really, really positively felt. I also appreciate the difficult financial circumstances we face ourselves, and in spite of the £5 billion being said by the party opposite to be a huge figure, it's actually the largest cut in social security support since 2015. And I would put that there are alternative, more compassionate ways to balance the books rather than on the back of sick and disabled people. I absolutely fundamentally believe that my right honourable friend is on the right course, and I implore my party to try and get our reforms to bed in first before we look to making the cuts, a point that others have also made. There's so much evidence of the adverse effects that the party opposite had with the cuts in support and the restrictions in eligibility criteria when they were in government, including the deaths of vulnerable people. And we can't have a repeat of that. So I would be grateful if my honourable friend could, as a matter of urgency, publish the analysis that they've had on the impacts, particularly on mental health impacts, and also to give an outline of when we are expected to respond. Thank you.
I really thank my honourable friend for her response. Let me say straight off, we will be publishing the equality impact analysis and the poverty analysis alongside the spring statement. I know that she is a lifelong champion for sick and disabled people and has rightly raised concerns, including through the Select Committee, on vital issues like safeguarding, and I look forward to receiving the Select Committee's report on that to learn from the evidence they've received. I would just say that although this package is a substantial package with those estimated savings, spending on working age, sickness and disability benefits will continue to rise over this Parliament. The last forecast was that it would continue to rise by £18 billion. It is not a cut, as the Honourable lady has said. These are really important issues. We need to work to get this right, to make sure the proper support is in place for people, and I really do genuinely look forward to working with the Select Committee to get all these proposals right.
Steve Darling, the Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would first of all like to start by thanking the Secretary of State for sharing her statement in advance. That was extremely welcome. Liberal Democrats want to see more people in work, including those with disabilities. Sadly, the significant blocker for those people getting into work is the appalling state of our health and social care system left behind by the Tories to my right in more ways than one. And we desperately need the new Labour government to drive forward with reforms that actually see an investment in our health service to improve it. The devil is in the detail of these proposals, and I do fear what we will find as we turn over rocks over the next few days, particularly for those who are most vulnerable. The Minister has described the system as a broken system, and so, therefore, I would like to ask the Minister, how are you driving... Chair. How is the Minister driving significant change through this? I fear that this is just tinkering around the edges where we need to see real culture change within the DWP. And also, Mr. Chair, investment in our NHS is absolutely more essential.
Secretary of State.
I actually agree with the honourable gentleman. We do need extra investment in the NHS and to overhaul the culture of the DWP, and that is precisely what we are doing. We are investing an additional £26 billion into the NHS, an extra £172 million into the Disabled Facilities Grant to help disabled people live independently, £3.7 billion into social care, because that's such an important issue. We do need a decisive cultural shift in the DWP. That's why our Get Britain working plans have announced proposals to overhaul job centres. And we've also said today we need to have a fundamental look at our safeguarding approach. And I would also say this, our Pathways to Work employment support programme genuinely is that. Because for some people, getting out of the house is an achievement. For others, going along to a community group, maybe doing voluntary action, getting skills, that is what we mean. And we will work closely, not only with the NHS and my right honourable friend and social care, but also voluntary organisations who have such a vital role to help people on a pathway to success.
Dave Hillier.
Mr. Speaker, and I welcome my right honourable friend's commitment to making sure that no one is on the scrap heap when it comes to working, that everyone will get the support that they need. I note that she's consulting on delaying access to the health top-up in universal credit until someone is aged 22, and would be grateful if she could explain the rationale for that age and what savings she expects to make if that consultation goes forward.
Secretary of State.
My right honourable friend raises a really important issue. I would say on that, honourable members, I mean, patience is not my greatest virtue, but honourable members will need to wait until the OBR's full assessment of individual measures and the savings that they make for the spring statement. And also on the delaying access to the health top-up for those under 22, there will be a specific exemption for those who are never able to work because their disability is so severe. But this is all about matching it with our youth guarantee, announced in the Get Britain working plan, to make sure every young person is earning or learning. Because if you are not in education, employment or training when you are young, the impact can be lifelong and scarring for your health, job prospects and earnings. And so we have got to put that right.
Esther McVey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How precisely will these benefit cuts be realised, given this government's anti-business budget, which has seen businesses close at the fastest rate since Labour was last in office, and of those still standing, 30% are planning to cut staff to cope with the increase in the employer's national insurance contribution? Where are the jobs? We know Labour is the party of the magic money tree. Is Labour now the party of the magic jobs tree too?
I mean, the only party that believes in magic money is members opposite, who wrote a cheque that they couldn't pay. And I would say to the Honourable Lady, unlike members opposite, we believe good work and good rights at work actually is a benefit to businesses, because the best businesses know it helps retain people and reduce the costs of recruitment. We are overhauling our approach with employers in the DWP because only 1 in 6 ever uses a job centre to recruit. We want to have a single account manager for all businesses. We're going to make sure our job centres are much more embedded in their local communities so they have detailed knowledge of individual employers. That is the way that we get Britain working and growing again.
Clive Lewis.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask the Minister, when they made the decision, to go down this route, did they understand the pain and difficulty that this will cause millions of people, millions of our constituents who are using food banks, who are using social supermarkets, people who are on the brink? This £5 billion cut is going to impact them more than I think her department is giving credit for. And I would like her department to be able to look my constituents in the eye when I go back to them to tell them that this is going to work for them, because as things stand, my constituents, my friends, my family are very angry about this, and they do not think this is the kind of action that a Labour government takes.
I have great respect for my honourable friend, but let me just say this to him. I've spent years chairing Feeding Leicester, the programme to end hunger in my city. And I know that I can look my constituents in the eye and say to them, I know that getting more people into better paid jobs is the key to their future success. I know dealing with their mental health problems, which we know are so prevalent, is absolutely essential. We, the Labour Party, believe that if you can work, we will give you the help to get back on your feet, because that is the long-term route to tackling poverty, tackling inequality, which is what this Labour Party is all about.
Caroline Day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Like the Honourable Lady, I was also elected in 2010, and I need to tell her that our recollections differ. Because when I came into this role after 13 years of Labour government, 7.5% of the young people in the Gosport constituency were not in education, employment or training. That was a number that was down to 3% by last year. And since they've taken office, 83,000 more people across this country of working age are now unemployed. So what I want to know from her is all the jobs that take on so many of the young people across our constituencies, from adult social care to childcare to hair and beauty, are telling me that they're not now taking on more staff as a result of her Chancellor's changes to national insurance contributions. Surely the two are mutually incompatible.
Secretary of State.
I would say to the Honourable Lady, unless we cut waiting times and waiting lists in the NHS so people can get back to health and back to work. That is the reason that we are investing an extra £26 billion into the NHS, and many employers have said to me that they are deeply concerned about that. And we are precisely dealing with those key sectors, health and social care, construction, all those areas where people want people with the skills to get jobs. We are overhauling our approach in DWP, setting up sector work-based academy programmes specifically tailored to employers' needs. I know there's more we need to do to work with employers to help them get people back into work, and that is what this government will deliver.
Dr. Tidball.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 14 years of Conservative failure, there's a 29% employment gap and a 17% pay gap for disabled people in this country. Therefore, we must ensure that the social model of disability is central to government decision-making to achieve inclusive growth that enables disabled people to fulfil their potential. I welcome her proactive approach to reasonable adjustments and the £1 billion support package to get disabled people back into work where they can work, as well as her recognition that PIP is designed as an in-work benefit to enable people to live independently, because research shows that supportive, incentive-based approaches massively outperform cuts or sanctions in getting disabled people into sustainable employment. What work has she done to develop inclusive growth strategies across all employment sectors to close the disability employment gap and the disability pay gaps?
Sarah State.
I absolutely agree with my right honourable friend. This is at the heart of our mission here, providing those equal rights and choices for disabled people to work as anybody else. We will be working with disabled people and the organisations that represent them to develop our pathways to work employment support so we get it right, because we won't do that unless we work closely with disabled people. And we are also working right across government. We have disability ministers in every single government department. They are driving this agenda forward, and I know that my right honourable friend will give much valued advice and help to make sure we get it right in every part of this government.
John Milne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Encouraging and enabling people back to work is a laudable aim, but how can the Minister assume £5 billion's worth of success in advance of actually rolling out the programme? Surely the right approach is to let the reforms generate savings naturally by a concrete reduction in need, rather than to set an arbitrary target beforehand.
We're not setting an arbitrary target. We're fixing a broken system, and we're taking action immediately, because we believe we have to both put in place that employment support, put in place the health support and social care support at the same time as fixing a broken benefit system. And I would just say to the honourable gentleman, I start first, last and always with people. What do we need to do to give people the opportunities they deserve if they can work? What do we need to do to make sure the social security system lasts in future? That is something that we cannot put off any longer, because that is not good enough for the people that we were elected to serve.
Johanna Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. PIP is a devolved benefit known as the Adult Disability Payment in Scotland. Can my right honourable friend assure me that she'll be working with partners, including the Scottish Government, to ensure that disabled people right across the whole of the UK get the support that they need?
Sarah State.
Absolutely, that is very important for me personally and the government as a whole, because we want people in Scotland to have the same chances and choices to work if they can do as everybody else, and to make sure people have proper protections. That is essential for us, and I will continue to work closely with the Scottish Government, not just in my own area, but I know across the board in other government departments too.
Pritchard.
Speaker. Youth unemployment stood at 642,000 as of the last quarter of 2024, a rise of 136,000 on 2023, and a youth unemployment rate of 14.8%. She mentions earlier in her statement, earn and learn. Does she agree with me that one way of perhaps attracting some people back into work is for her to have discussions with her colleague in the Ministry of Defence, the Defence Secretary? And would she agree with me that getting more young people into His Majesty's Armed Forces, Air Force, Navy, Army, would be a starting place?
I absolutely agree with the honourable gentleman. Indeed, before I was appointed to this position in opposition as a constituency MP, I have discussed with my local job centre and the Armed Forces recruitment precisely these issues, because of the really exciting careers and opportunities that are available. I think are really important for young people in my constituency and the one that he represents, and I will certainly be having more conversations with colleagues in the Ministry of Defence to make sure we put this plan into action.
Clive Efford.
Mr. Speaker, I've heard many people make a moral case for the changes that my right honourable friend has announced today. But does she agree that over the last 20 years, those people with large amounts of wealth have done extremely well, whilst average household incomes have stagnated and the standard of living for the overwhelming majority has gone down? So whilst we make a moral case for changes to the benefit system, shouldn't we also be making a case for how we tax wealth as opposed to income?
My honourable friend is right that those with the broadest shoulders should bear the biggest burden, and that's why I'm very proud that we have tackled issues like closing loopholes in the non-dom tax status, why we've looked at the profits of the energy companies and many other areas. I think that is an absolute principle of this Labour Party of fairness in the tax system.
Stephen Flynn.
They say they won't change their fiscal rules because of their manifesto. They say they won't change their tax policies because of their manifesto. They say they won't change their position in relation to the single market because of their manifesto. Perhaps the Secretary of State could outline to me and to people right across the UK where in her manifesto it stated that they were going to take £5 billion away from disabled people.
I'm very happy to send a highlighted version of our manifesto to the honourable gentleman, where we said we would reform or replace the WCA. We said we'd make sure we dealt with backlogs in access to work. We said we'd make work pay. We said we'd invest more in the NHS. We said we'd improve employment rights. We said we'd create jobs in every part of the country. I'm very proud we're delivering on it. I just asked the honourable gentleman to take a look at what's happening in Scotland and their record there, because there's probably more they could do.
Jill German.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted to hear my right honourable friend announce additional investment for high-quality, tailored and personalised support to help people on a pathway to work, and the recognition that for so many it is indeed a pathway and not just a series of referrals that just lead back to square one. So can my right honourable friend assure me that joint working with local support services like those in Clwyd North, already doing great work, will form part of this so a truly local, person-centred approach can be achieved?
Yes. We won't get this right unless we draw on the huge strengths of our voluntary and community organisations. You know, I have never believed that there are hard-to-reach groups. It's just we need to change what we do. And I think there's a lot we can learn from groups like the one my honourable friend suggests, because it really is a pathway to work. I think we've got to end this false divide between those who can and can't work and understand that there are steps towards a better life, and that's what this government wants to deliver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Two practical questions. She said she's joining Job Seekers Allowance and Employment Support Allowance into a new time-limited unemployment insurance. What is that time limit? And second of all, she said an expectation on people to look for work. What happens when they don't meet that expectation, and what discipline is faced if they don't take that up?
The time limit is one of the things we're consulting on in the Green Paper, and I look forward to hearing his views about that. And in terms of the expectation to engage, it's actually very interesting when we have started to free up our work coach time, actually offer support on the phone, in person. Many people have come forward because we're trying to change the culture of that. Actually, I mean, the Conservatives always leap straight to a position where people refuse to get involved. Actually, we've got to change the culture. And I believe that is the way that we would get more people onto that pathway to success.
Lawrence Hesselin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with the Secretary of State that many disabled and sick people want to work, but the reality is cutting PIP will not address the reasons why they don't. The Secretary of State outlined the reasonable adjustment framework for disabled people is hard. It's very hard to navigate. It took me 6 months to navigate that for my member of staff in the place where we legislate. So how hard is it going to be for disabled people in the workplace to try to get those employees to make those adjustments? Can the Secretary of State outline how she's going to make sure that the workplace is ready for people accessing the workplace, and that disabled gap employment, which really, in a sense, doesn't have anything to do with benefits, but some of the reasonable adjustments that we see not happening at the moment?
I know my honourable friend is an absolute passionate advocate of these issues, and she's right. We have to do far more to work with employers to ensure that those basic reasonable adjustments need to be made. That is one of the issues that Sir Charlie Mayfield is looking at in our Keep Britain Working review, precisely because we know good employers understand the need to make these changes. I am very happy to meet with my honourable friend to go through this in more detail, because she's right. We've got to get this absolutely nailed.
Gavin Robinson.
Speaker. First it was the pensioners and their winter fuel allowance, then it was the waspy women and broken promises, and now it's the sick and the vulnerable. We believe in protecting the taxpayer, but protecting those who need our support the most, and yet not a word about abuse or not a word about those who are taking money out of the system when they are not entitled to it. Can I ask the Secretary of State how she can rationalise in her mind, in this statement, how she, on the one hand, accepts that people's health and their well-being can fluctuate, but on the other hand say that she's going to do away with the accumulation of points. To require an applicant to get 4 points in any one box does away with the ability to recognise that mental ill health particularly manifests itself in many different ways, and that accumulation of points has been incredibly important to get support for those who need it most. If it fluctuates, how is she doing away with that accumulation?
I would say to the honourable gentleman, there is very clear evidence that good work is good for mental health. And that is for people with anxiety and depression, but also those with more severe conditions. Psychosis, schizophrenia, really clear evidence from the NHS individual placement and support programme that you can help people get into work. That's not only better for them and their incomes, but it reduces their relapses and spending on the NHS. He asks me how I rationalise this. It's because I am not prepared to accept a system that is miserable for people, that traps them in poverty, that denies people the chances and support they deserve. And I am also not prepared to accept an inexorable rise in the cost of spending, much of which is on the cost of failure, precisely because I want to ensure the social security system lasts for the long term.
Sarah Owen.
Mr. Speaker, I think all of us on this side of the House at least understand the scale of the financial bin fire left by the previous government. But there are those that are worried and are seeking assurances at home. Of the 1 million people potentially losing disability support, what guarantees can my right honourable friend give that those that are unable to feed or toilet themselves will not lose out in personal care? And of the 1 million who can and do want to work, of course we welcome that £1 billion extra support. But how is this government going to hold uncooperative employers' feet to the fire in giving disabled people an equal chance of employment and career success?
Thursday.
I agree with my honourable friend. I know people are worried and concerned. And that is a really important issue. It's why I disagreed with the opposition spokesman saying we need to be tough. I'm not interested in that. This is real people and real lives. And I would say that the changes in PIP are not coming in immediately. They will be from November 2026 for new claimants. Those with severe conditions who will never work will be protected. If people do have a reassessment, it will be done by a fully trained assessor or a healthcare professional based on their individual needs. And in order to ensure there is greater confidence in those assessors and the decisions that are being taken, we will overhaul our safeguarding and training, and we will record those assessments as a standard, because that is absolutely essential.
So Desmond Sway.
Speaker, because working is so beneficial to mental health, will she require claimants to undertake socially useful work in order to retain their benefits?
Sarah State.
No.
There's only a few.
Neil Coyle.
Neil Coyle.
Can I thank the Secretary of State for listening to disabled people and their organisations on ending the needless, wasteful and extremely expensive repeat reassessments for those with progressive conditions. I hope it's being welcomed by those who've campaigned for that for many years. But can I ask if the Green Paper plans will include tackling the disincentives to work for disabled people and others in supported housing that mean working more than 15 hours a week can actually result in financial penalties in a system not just ignored by the party opposite, but put in place by the two parties opposite in coalition when they fumbled the universal credit introduction? Will this government fix those tax allowances to ensure that work always pays, including for disabled people in supported housing?
My right honourable friend, the Minister for Social Security and Disability, is looking at that, and I am sure he will discuss these issues with my honourable friend if he would like that.
John Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've heard nothing today that shows the government has yet listened to disabled people. Any changes to PIP should have been co-produced, but we have this week 25 disabled people's groups and charities writing to ministers begging to be included and not as an afterthought. Can the Secretary of State explain why disabled people are feeling so disregarded and scapegoated, and why impoverishing them to the tune of £5 billion is a higher priority than a simple wealth tax?
Hear, hear.
Secretary of State.
I mean, I think many disabled people did feel disregarded and ignored under the Conservative government. And I would say to her that on many, not all, but many aspects of what I've announced today, we will be working with disabled people and the organisations that represent them. And if she has particular issues and concerns that she would like to raise, I would be very, very happy to her if she'd like to write for me or meet myself or the Minister for Social Security and Disability.
Mike Donald.
Mr. Speaker, you know that there are decisions made in this House that stay with you for the rest of your life. This is one of them. Can I say to the Secretary of State, we all agree with their objectives of trying to ensure that disabled people are fully have the resources to have a decent quality of life, and that those capable of work have the support to get them into work. But the reality is trying to find up to £5 billion worth of cuts by manipulating, by changing the PIP rules, the criteria, will result in immense suffering, and we've seen it in the past, loss of life. So what monitoring, independent monitoring, will take place that will be reported to this House, and what threshold of suffering will it take to take an alternative route to supporting disabled people?
I would say to my honourable friend, I take very seriously the issues that I've announced today. We absolutely want to make sure that all of the assessment processes and training are properly scrutinised, and we are overhauling our safeguarding processes. But let me just say this. My objective is to improve the lives and life chances of sick and disabled people, for those who can work, to support them to get into work, for those who will never work, to protect them, switching off the reassessments that have been done to give them dignity and respect. And I believe that that mission, not only to ensure those who can work do work, but to secure the sustainability of the social security for the long term, is precisely the responsibility of a Labour Party that founded the welfare state.
Dame Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of the first acts of her government was to take away the winter fuel allowance from millions of pensioners on incomes as low as £13,000 a year, including 44,000 who are terminally ill or were. So can she reassure all our constituents that in making these changes, she will not be going after those who have a terminal illness?
That is absolutely essential for me personally and for the government as a whole, and I do give that assurance to the honourable lady. But I would just gently say to her, you know, under the Conservatives, pensioner poverty increased, and they left 880,000 pensioners not getting the pension credit they deserve. They are suddenly converted to caring about pensioners on low incomes. In contrast, we've decided to act.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a physio, I know that optimising somebody's function and independence in work or not in work saves the system so much money because it prevents dependency. However, I find that incongruous with the cut of £5 billion and also changing the eligibility criteria. So will she ensure that before those precise measures are brought before the House, that disabled people are consulted and involved in that decision-making process, but also that we ensure that people maintain their independence, their psychological safety, their dignity, and aren't pushed further into poverty?
Secretary of State.
I would say to the honourable lady, I absolutely agree that keeping older people as physically independent for as long as possible is vital. That is one of the reasons why we're investing £26 billion extra into the NHS. We're also rolling out employment advisors, not only in talking therapies and mental health services, but starting that in physical health too, including for people with musculoskeletal conditions, because I think getting people back to health and back to work is so important. We will be legislating on the PIP changes. There will be full ability for this House to debate those changes, and we will be consulting with disabled people, crucially, on the employment support programme, how we get that right, and how we make sure that is much more joined up with the health support that many disabled people, sick and disabled people need.
Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many of my Hazel Grove constituents are keen as mustard to get back to work, but they are waiting for either a diagnosis or treatment on the NHS. This is made more difficult by capital spending needed at Stepping Hill Hospital, and also the fact that mental health services across Greater Manchester are stretched too thinly. What assurance can the Secretary of State give these constituents that her announcements today are not going to make more difficult an already really difficult time of their lives?
Yeah. Mary Rimmer.
I mean, she's absolutely right to champion the needs of... Sorry. Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. She's absolutely right to champion her constituents' needs and to say many people... In fact, we recently did a survey of people on sickness and disability benefits, and 2 in 5 of them all said they were on a waiting list. And that is really concerning to us, which is why we are putting that extra investment in place. We need to go further and faster on driving those waiting lists down, but we have already achieved those 2 million extra appointments that we said we'd deliver in our manifesto 7 months early, and we will do even more to make sure her constituents get back to health and back to work.
Mary Rimmer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Nearly 1 million young people are leaving school and not in employment and training or education. My colleague and I, both representing St Helens, received a letter a couple of weeks ago, and it came a message from tutors in the college who were having difficulty getting young people to join training, education, and could we do anything about it? Could the Minister say a little more about a guarantee for employment for young people and how we're going to get them to accept training? They were afraid of a cut in universal credit. I have to admit, I didn't know young people were on universal credit.
Yes.
I promised I will keep my answers shorter because I know there are so many colleagues who want to get in. Actually, our youth guarantee is going to start being rolled out from next month. It will bring together, local leaders, mayors and local leaders will bring together all that work, health and skills support locally. I'm very happy to talk to her personally about what more we can do in her constituency, because she's right. We've got to get those young people on a pathway to success.
Jerome Mayhew.
Deputy Speaker, when I fought the last election, I was honest with my electorate, telling them that we would save £12 billion from the welfare budget. Was the Minister honest with her electorate when she talked about their plans to cut disability welfare, or is she making this policy on the hoof because the Chancellor has destroyed economic growth?
Secretary of State.
They didn't have a plan. The former Chancellor, the member for Godalming and Ash, actually admitted during the general election that money had already been scored. So I'd say I will listen more to the honourable member when they actually put forward a plan that works instead of having it discredited in the courts.
Dan Francis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Too many carers of disabled people end up with physical and mental health disabilities themselves and end up trapped in the system of their loved one. What more can the Secretary of State do with her colleagues in the Department of Health and Department of Education to stop that trap?
Secretary of State.
I've been a lifelong champion of family carers who give their all to looking after the people they love. My honourable friend will know we've already boosted the carers allowance earning threshold by £45 a week to £196, benefiting more than 60,000 carers by 29/30, the biggest ever cash increase in the earnings threshold for carers. There's much more we need to do to support family carers, including them, enabling them to balance their work and caring responsibilities. So I look forward to talking to my honourable friend about this, because there's much more we need to do.
Dr Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Secretary of State says she'll legislate for a change in PIP so that people must score a minimum of 4 points in at least one activity to qualify in the future. This means that an individual who needs supervision or assistance with therapy 3.5 hours a week, and prompting and assistance with washing, and assistance to get in the bath or shower, and supervision to manage their toilet needs, and assistance to dress and undress their lower body would no longer qualify for PIP. How many such individuals are there?
Secretary of State.
It doesn't mean that. What I would say is that every single case is assessed on individual need. And I would say to the honourable lady, it is really important that she understands and her constituents understand we will protect those with the severe disabilities who can never work. And for anyone who goes through a reassessment process, that will be done based on their personal individual needs.
Dr Zabir Ahmed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend will agree with me that under the managed decline of the SNP, people in Scotland are more likely to be economically inactive than the rest of the UK. She will further agree with me that we have greater ambitions for the people of Scotland, particularly young people, than the party opposite. Will she agree with me that these reforms are absolutely necessary so they put more Scots back to work and back on the road to prosperity?
Secretary of State.
Yes, I would. I mean, people in Scotland deserve the same chances and choices to work, to get skills, get training, to not have young people leaving school without the qualifications they need, to not have an NHS that isn't reducing waiting times, to overhaul job centres. Absolutely. And we will continue to work with the Scottish Government to put all of those problems right, because we want people in every part of this country to benefit.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Secretary of State's shift towards prevention. Last May, my constituent Alexander McRandall was riding his motorbike on the lanes of East Devon when he struck a pothole and was thrown from his bike. His collision resulted in permanent nerve damage. He's had to leave a 40-year career. His wife Louise has given up work to look after him. While they will be reassured to hear that the government is not going to freeze PIP, does the Secretary of State recognise that prevention also requires more investment in local government to prevent situations like theirs?
Secretary of State.
I'm really sorry to hear about what's happened to his constituent and his family, and the impact that this must have had on them. I think there is absolutely more we need to do to provide local support. That's why the Get Britain Working Plan actually isn't all being determined by Whitehall, because I think local leaders know best what local areas need. So that is why we are devolving more resources, more powers and more responsibilities to local areas to make sure we shift the focus towards prevention and early intervention and help get people back on their feet.
Mary Kelly-Foy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When cuts to incapacity support was introduced by the last government through the work-related activity component, we saw severe rises in poverty with no significant increase in employment, and cases of mental health skyrocketing. And in the North East, we already have some of the highest rates of poverty and ill health in the country. So what assurances can the Secretary of State give me that these changes won't push people in areas like mine further into poverty and ill health?
It is absolutely about areas like my honourable friend represents, areas that have been written off and denied opportunities for so long. And it's really important that we look at this in the round. The action we're taking to create more good jobs in every part of the country through the modern industrial strategy, clean energy, and building 1.5 million homes. My honourable friend, the Health Secretary, is sending in specific teams into the top 20 areas with the highest levels of economic inactivity to drive down those waiting lists. There is much more that we need to do to make this focused on the areas that need help most, and I look forward to working with my honourable friend to make that happen.
Carla Lockhart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today, across the United Kingdom and in my constituency of Upper Bann, so many genuine benefit recipients are fearful of what lies ahead. People who are vulnerable and need a compassionate welfare system to assist them in their day-to-day living. Regrettably, there's been no reassurance given to those people today, particularly on the 4-point minimum requirement. Little mention today about fraud and the genuine need to tackle it head-on. Does the Secretary of State not believe that equipping our benefit fraud officers with resources and powers to catch and deal with those frauding would be a better starting point than sweeping changes that will unlikely outsmart the fraudster but will hit the most vulnerable?
The Honourable Lady may not know, but we have a fraud bill going through Parliament right now because we believe £8 billion wasted on fraud every single year is unacceptable. I'm more than happy to write to her to set out the contents of that bill and then we can have another discussion.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the reality remains that over the last few weeks, thousands of the most severely disabled people in my constituency and millions across the UK have watched in disbelief as politicians debate cuts to the support that enables their very survival, leaving many at breaking point, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Secretary of State understand the real fear and distress that this has caused? And will she today, from that dispatch box, commit to ensuring that not a single person who currently receives PIP now is unfairly punished or left struggling by these plans?
Secretary of State.
I do understand the worry and anxiety, and I hope I've made clear to the House today. I don't start from a position of being tough. I start by precisely from a position of compassion for people who can work, who are being denied opportunities, and for compassion for severely disabled people who will never work, which is one of the reasons why we're overhauling our safeguarding processes and ensuring those who can never work are never reassessed to give them the confidence and dignity they deserve.
Gregory Stafford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome any initiative that will see more people getting back into work. And whilst I have some concerns about the detail that the Secretary of State has announced, especially around targeting, I think, the wrong people within this, and also the fact that there won't be the jobs for them to go to because of national insurance contributions, can I press, however, on the actual detail? I find it strange that she can tell us it's going to save £5 billion, but can't even give us a ballpark figure of how much she's going to spend beyond and above the £1 billion that she's already announced. I know it's going to come out in the OBR. I don't expect it to the penny, but can she give us a rough cost of how much her changes are actually going to cost?
Secretary of State.
The honourable gentleman may know that members on this side of the House strongly believe in and support the independence of the OBR and the processes behind it. So whilst we are able to give overall figures today, the individual costings, how many people who will be affected, and by how much, he will have to wait until the OBR assessment is published at the spring statement.
Gianwara.
Many constituents have contacted me afraid of losing their benefits. After 14 years of Tory neglect and chaos and several months of scaremongering, there's real vulnerability and fear in my constituency. So could she confirm that on this side of the House, we believe that those who cannot work are entitled to a decent standard of living nevertheless? And like her, I believe that good work is good for you. Good for mental well-being, good for sense of worth, good for economic security, and disabled people are entitled to that. Would you write to me and set out in detail the incremental support that disabled people in Newcastle Central and West, including tech support, can expect as a result of these measures, and when?
Secretary of State.
I absolutely commit to doing that.
Harriet Cross.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The statement referred to right to try legislation being brought forward, and in the statement the Secretary of State also referred to de-risking work. But the Treasury's NICS rises make employing more expensive. and the Employment Rights Bill makes employing more risky. What assessment has her department done with other relevant departments on the impact of the recent government policies on job creation, and what impact this will have for the opportunities of sick and disabled people to try work?
Secretary of State.
I mean, members on this side of the House believe good work and employment rights makes it more likely that people will take work. That's why we're bringing them forward, and it makes it more likely to keep people in work. And actually, we have a lot of employers who want to work with us to get the people that they need. Because they are struggling to fill those vacancies, we're overhauling our approach to that because we want to serve employers to better meet their needs.
Melanie Ward.
Of course, everyone in our country who can work and should receive appropriate support to do so. It is of the utmost importance to many on these benches that Labour ensures that disabled people who can never work are supported and protected to live the best possible life in dignity. Can the Minister tell me how an adult who cannot work, however much they would have liked to, because, for example, they have cerebral palsy, a visual impairment and learning difficulties, and who is on enhanced PIP and LCWRA, will be affected by these changes? What would be the impact on their finances?
Secretary of State.
I know my honourable friend cares absolutely passionately about these issues, and I have spoken to her about them many times before. I absolutely agree, and we commit that people who will never be able to work because of the severity of their disability or health condition will be protected by this. And in fact, by never going back and reassessing people, I hope that we will make a positive improvement, giving them the dignity and respect they need and deserve.
Alison Bennett.
Madam Deputy Speaker, culture matters, and when I've spoken to carers who've been the victim of the carers overpayment scandal, the culture at the DWP is something they describe as spirit-crushing. But the culture of the government matters too. And last week I spoke to my constituent Jeff, who lives in Haywards Heath, who is partially sighted, and he told me that he and the partially sighted community have been sick with worry about what's been brought forward today. Does the Secretary of State think that the pitch rolling that's gone over the last 10 days is the right way to make these kinds of announcements?
Secretary of State.
I hope from now on honourable members will focus on the proposals we are actually putting forward. I would say to her culture does really matter, and that is, she referenced carers allowance. That's why we launched an independent investigation into this, because I don't just want to be told we're putting things right. I want independent voices to say that we are actually putting that right. And even recently, I would just say, I think many of our work coaches in job centres are absolutely wonderful, but I've heard from other honourable members in this House things like work coaches ringing deaf people. You know, we have to start changing that, looking at our training processes, putting all of this right, so everyone is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve.
Adam Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In Erewash, there are many disabled and sick people who can never work, but who are forced to jump endlessly through hoops for the benefits that they need to survive. Can I welcome the Secretary of State's plan to switch off reassessments and end the needless stresses that these people must endure? And can I ask her to elaborate on these plans?
This is actually something really important to myself and the Minister for Social Security and Disability personally, through cases that we've seen where it seems, quite frankly, unbelievable that people whose disability is never going to change or their health condition is only going to get progressively worse. So whilst we switch reassessments back on and more face-to-face for people on the health top-up, we really want to make sure that there is dignity and respect for those who can and will never work, and I would be more than happy to write to my honourable friend with more details about that proposal in the Green Paper.
Kirsty Blackman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, has the Secretary of State ever been diagnosed with depression? Because I have. I have been in a situation where getting up in the morning, where having a shower, where brushing your teeth feels like the biggest fight just to achieve those things. Does she think that putting people with diagnosis of a mental health condition through more reassessments is going to make their mental health condition better, or is it going to make it worse?
The honourable lady will forgive me if I don't talk about any health issues I may or may not have had in the past, and although she is brave enough to talk about them in this House. I would say that people's mental health condition affects them in many, many different ways. And there are people with anxiety and depression who say to me that work has actually given them structure and purpose and helped them deal with the problems. And others who've said sometimes they just can't get out of bed, let alone out of the house. And I think we need to have a system which recognises the different and fluctuating nature of these conditions and does whatever is right for that person to get them back to health and, if they can, back to work.
Don Butler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I was a manager in the Employment Service, and it's always needed reform, from telling people that they have to come back in 6 weeks to get help, or under the Tory government being told we've got to move people from employment benefits onto incapacity benefits to say that there was more people in employment. So it's always needed reform. How we go about it and the way we go about it is fundamental and important. And I don't think it should be linked to saving money, because that's rather crass and it's caused lots of anxiety for my constituents in Brent East and elsewhere. The patriotic millionaires have said that just a 2% on assets over 10 million will bring in £22 billion a year. That's a better way to bring money in to help fill the black hole that we found ourselves in for the disaster of 14 years of the Tory government. Does the Minister agree with me that aspiration, compassion, care, fairness will be the hallmark of this Labour government?
Aspiration, compassion, care, fairness is absolutely the hallmark of this government. That is why we are bringing forward these reforms. And as I've said earlier to the House, I don't start from a spreadsheet. I start from my belief that everybody has a value and a contribution to make in whatever way, and that we want people to fulfil their potential, and that is what these reforms are about.
Ben Obsejecti.
Speaker, given the announced changes to the personal independence payment, what assessment has the Secretary of State made of the potential impact upon injured service personnel claiming the personal independence payment as an interim measure whilst their compensation claims are processed prior to the awarding of the Armed Forces independence payment? And will the Armed Forces independence payment also be in scope of these changes?
Secretary of State.
May I say to the honourable gentleman, I will look into that in detail and I will respond to him as soon as I can.
Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend co-chairs the Child Poverty Task Force. Can she tell the House what analysis she has undertaken of the impact of the reforms she's announcing today on child poverty? Will she publish that analysis? And can she assure the House that the reforms she is announcing today will not make child poverty worse for anybody who is a child living in a family where their parents or carers are in receipt of benefits?
Secretary of State.
As I said earlier, and my honourable friend raises a very important point, we will publish the equality impact analysis and the poverty impact analysis around the time of the spring statement. I would say what's really important is we have to look at the benefits for more people being in work and improving their incomes. That is absolutely essential, and we will be coming forward with our child poverty strategy because we have a clear manifesto commitment to drive that down, because children growing up in poverty could have their life chances damaged for years to come, and we are determined to put that right.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The predication of this whole statement is saving £5 billion at the expense of people with disabilities in our society. Anyone who's been through the trauma of trying to apply for a personal independence payment and the intrusive nature of the questioning and the very great difficulty of obtaining it and then of continuing to receive it in the future, what her statement has done is caused consternation and dismay to many people around the country who understandably are alarmed that their benefits are going to go down, particularly those with disabilities, and they're going to live in greater poverty as a result of it. Can she, with hand on heart, say that no disabled person is going to be worse off after a statement, or is that £5 billion going to be taken at the expense of those who live the most difficult lives already in our society?
Secretary of State.
The predication of this statement is to stop people being written off, denied opportunities, denied hope, denied a future, and it's about making the social security system sustainable for the long term. And that for me is so important, because when you have 1,000 new people being new PIP awards every single day, many driven by mental health, young people. We have got to look at this. We can't duck this challenge because I want a social security system that is there for centuries to come.
Before I call the next member, I am hoping to try and get everybody in, but I will be finishing around 2:30, so please do help each other by keeping questions and answers short. Gregor Poynton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My Livingston constituents will welcome the Secretary of State's commitment today to protect with dignity those who cannot work because they're so severely disabled or with illness. But there are many sick and disabled people who can work with the right support. So can my right honourable friend confirm that those people will get the support they need to get into work to build a better life for them and their families?
Secretary of State.
Yes. Honourable members have rightly said that PIP is not a benefit related to work, it's a contribution to the extra costs of living with a disability. And actually 17% of people on PIP are in work. I want to expand opportunities for disabled people who can work to get into work, because the disability employment gap, which actually fell under the last government, has sort of flatlined. We want to sort that out because we believe disabled people should have the same rights and chances to work if they can as everybody else.
Vicky Slade.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can the Minister offer some reassurance to Sue from Wareham about her 45-year-old son who is permanently disabled through childhood illness? She told me that he's got great abilities and works part-time with support, but every time there's a change of circumstance, he has to prove again his permanent disability. Now, you've confirmed that there will be changes regarding reassessments by DWP, but will these also apply across other government departments, including DFT, for matters including bus passes and blue badges? Because these things cause huge mental health issues.
Secretary of State.
She raises a really important point. I will look at that and write back to the Honourable Lady to make sure we address it properly.
Charlotte Nichols.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. While I accept it's perfectly possible for people with the right support with severe mental health conditions to work, as in Warrington we already have an employment rate above the government's national target, is there not a risk that these proposals today are premature and are legislating for the mental health services we might hope to have in the future, not where these services are today? And does she accept that the issue is not over-diagnosis, but the broken mental health services we inherited?
Secretary of State.
I've always believed that we should follow the evidence on this. We've got a clear commitment to recruiting 8,500 new mental health workers to have mental health support in every primary and secondary school to prevent problems from happening. But I would say we also need to roll out this individual placement support within the NHS. I mean, I've seen it in my own constituency. It can be life-transforming, but we need to go further and faster to ensure all people with mental health problems who can work do that.
Anne Davies.
Madam Deputy, Wales will be hit hard by these cuts, with the second highest proportion of disabled people of working age in the UK. And stripping £5 billion from the system will only increase pressure on other services. Has the Secretary of State secured her Labour Welsh Government colleagues' approval, as they will be the ones that will have to shoulder the cost of these damaging cuts?
Well done. Secretary of State.
Welsh Labour wants to see more people having the chances and choices to get good jobs. That is why we have a modern industrial strategy to create good jobs in every part of the country, why we're building 1.5 million new homes, why we want to see clean energy support. All of these things will make a huge difference. We do not believe the status quo is acceptable or inevitable. That is why our plan for change will create more good jobs in every part of the company, and that's something I hope she and her party will welcome.
Annalise Midgley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I support the measures taken in this statement to get people who can work into work. I've been contacted by constituents who are worried. Like my constituent Lisa, who's got a son with a severe disability, he will never be able to work and relies on current support. So can my right honourable friend assure me that people like my constituent who cannot work and will never be able to work will not be worse off under these proposals?
Secretary.
We absolutely will protect those who can never work. And one thing that I haven't said to the House so far, one of the things we're actually consulting on in the Green Paper, is whether we should increase the age at which children get DLA from 16 to 18. I think that's a very important point to give people the reassurance they need and deserve.
Okay,
Jim Allister.
Thank you. To me, parity in our welfare benefits is a key feature of our union. When the last government introduced their welfare reforms, the Northern Ireland Executive saw fit to introduce mitigations, for which they had to pay by taking money off health and education out of the block grant. If on this occasion the Northern Ireland Executive decides to mitigate these cuts, can the Secretary of State confirm that again that money would have to come out of needed services like health and education?
And I would say to the honourable gentleman full details about the impact of these changes on the block grant will be available at the spring statement. At the last budget provided the biggest ever block grant settlement since devolution, and I will absolutely be working closely with both my honourable friend the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland Executive to make sure that we do everything possible to help people in Northern Ireland into work and off benefits, to make sure they have the same chances and choices as people right across the United Kingdom.
Andrew Pakes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Peterborough is a youth unemployment hotspot. And I know there's not many members on the other benches left at the moment, but one of the most shameful parts of their record has been writing off a generation with 1 in 8 young people not in education, earning or training. There is nothing progressive or good about a government that writes off young people and puts them on benefits. Can I welcome the work that she's announced about employment support services for young people, and can I ask her to speak more about my passion, which is the government's youth guarantee, and how we put into reality youth jobs for the future?
I know that young people in my honourable friend's constituency are much more likely to be unemployed than young people in the rest of the country, and his passion for the youth guarantee. We are investing extra support into that youth guarantee in his area, and I look forward to launching that youth guarantee very, very soon.
Tatton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I applaud the intention of getting people back to work, of course we do. But my inbox, I am certain like everybody else here, is full of emails from petrified disabled constituents. And the recurring theme is this, Minister, is the absolute disbelief that once again welfare cuts are being imposed by no other than the Labour government. What will she say to my constituent, Jason, who lives in our city, who has now been told by Leicester City Council they will now consider his PIP payment as income and have increased the amount he has to pay by council tax? How does the Minister expect Jason to find the additional £900?
I'm very happy if he writes to me about that constituent so I can look at the issue.
Kim Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. 3/4 of the people who claim universal credit and disability have gone without essential items in the past 6 months. The £5 billion cut is likely to make that worse for them. I've had lots of emails from my Liverpool Riverside constituency, and as mentioned already this afternoon, will the Minister speak with the Chancellor about looking at a wealth tax, because we need a wealth tax and not to be attacking those most vulnerable.
I know my honourable friend cares passionately about these issues. Her constituents will not only benefit from the £1 billion investment into employment support, but the first ever above inflation permanent increase in universal credit if they are on both universal credit and PIP. And we have already taken action to ensure those with the broadest shoulders take a bigger burden, including our action on the non-dom tax status and a tax on the profits of the utility companies. That principle of fairness is vital to us all.
Jim Shannon.
Minister, I go on the tube twice a week, and the disability seat in the carriageway, it says not every disability is visible. With that being in mind, will the Secretary of State commit to ensuring that those with severe mental health issues such as paranoid psychosis, those with anxiety, those with depression, those with PTSD, mental issues, that they who already fear phone calls and withheld phone numbers coming to their houses, that they will not be impacted or hounded when trying to root out fraudsters? And does the Secretary of State accept that for those with severe mental health who do not understand their illness, that they can't explain, what they can't grasp, and how will these people, my people, our people, be protected?
State.
I think everyone's situation and condition is individual and personal to them. That's why it's really important any reassessments are done on an individual case-by-case basis. I would say that there will be people with psychosis and schizophrenia who can never work, but I have also, in Leicester, met people with precisely those conditions who have got work through the employment advice provided by the NHS in individual placement and support. That is why the pathways to work, employment support, I've said, is personalised and tailored to that individual need. It is not easy in a system as big and as complex as the social security system to look at to give an answer right now to the individuals he's saying, but that's why we must have those personalised assessments done. And I want to make sure much more is done to make sure they're done properly.
Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last night I got a response from the Minister for Social Security and Disability to a written question I'd asked on the average payment for the daily living component of PIP. It showed that the average payment was just £12 per day. The daily living component is for extra help needed with everyday tasks like washing, eating, using the toilet and getting dressed. But the Secretary of State's proposal for tightening the eligibility criteria could mean that even those who are assessed as needing help in every criterion may not be entitled to PIP. Isn't it wrong to balance the books on the backs of the sick and disabled people in such a way?
I thank my honourable friend for the proposal, just to sort of confirm that we will focus PIP on those with highest needs by changing the assessment so a minimum 4 points is required on the daily living component. That will be for new claimants from November 2026. People who are coming up for reassessments, they will be done on a personal case-by-case basis. I really understand why honourable members put forward issues about individuals, but we can't determine that from the dispatch box. It's got to be done on an individual case-by-case basis.
Well,
Deputy Speaker, I represent the second most deprived constituency in the United Kingdom with nearly 1 in 2 children living in poverty, and I really worry about the child poverty numbers that these measures could impact on. But just coming to young people, and especially mental health, we've got double the national average of young people out of work and education and training, but they can't get access to mental health support to get them into work. This is happening right across Blackpool, but across the country. What can the Secretary of State do to turbocharge the health service, but also put voluntary and the third sector and the charity sector into job centres so people can access mental health support immediately, rather than waiting for us to rebuild the NHS after they left it in such a terrible mess?
I mean, we actually want to look at putting job centres into GP surgeries, into community centres. I mean, I believe in a jobs and careers service, going to where people are rather than always expecting them to come to us. He is right to raise this issue. I mean, in some parts of the country, I believe I'm right in saying this, for example, in Manchester, in the combined authority there, they've actually commissioned specific talking therapist support for people who are looking for work. That is the direction of travel we want to move in, and I'm more than happy to discuss that with him in more detail.
Deirdre Costigan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Hundreds of disabled people in Ealing Southall want to work, but they often face absolute poverty pay and feel they would be better off on benefits. This is because, on average, disabled workers are paid £2.35 an hour less than other workers. That's £4,300 less a year. Can the Secretary of State outline how Labour's commitment in the King's speech to a new equality bill will ensure that disabled workers finally get equal pay at work and can choose a good job over feeling...
Order. Secretary of State.
I'm delighted to tell my honourable friend we have today launched the consultation on equality pay gap reporting, and I hope that will make a huge difference.
Blair McDougall.
Madam Deputy Speaker, if we do believe in the social model of disability described by the member for Penistone and Stocksbridge earlier on, can I encourage the Secretary of State and all of us to find a different language to talk about this? Because when we talk about disabled people as unable to work, we ignore the fact that the majority of disabled adults are in work, and those that are not often are desperate to get into work but are held back by low pay and by lack of opportunities. And can we look again at access to work? to make sure that the largest and most profitable employers are bearing more of the costs of adaptation.
Can I remind members, there's a lot of members to get in. Please help each other and keep your questions and your answers short. Secretary of State.
He's right. There's actually more disabled people in work than ever before. We need to recognise it and go further. We are launching a consultation on access to work to make sure that more people are able to get that vital support and that it goes into the right place at the right time.
Mohammed Yassin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I agree with the government that welfare reform is necessary, but many of my constituents are very worried about support they rely on being removed. 14 years of austerity under the Conservative took its toll on our nation, with public services cuts and cost of living crisis pushing people to the brink. So what the government is doing to address the root cause of people being unable to work rather than just focusing on symptoms?
Secretary of State.
We are precisely focusing on the root causes, what more we can do to change the world of work, how we can get people back to health and back to work, how we can give people the skills that they need, tackling the disincentives in the benefit system. I'm not interested in tinkering around. It's too important for people, and life is short. I want to get this right, tackle the root causes, and put this country on a pathway to success.
That's Eccles.
Speaker, many organisations, including our own NHS, use punitive capability processes when scoring people's illness when they become sick during work. And this adds additional stress to the people who need support most. What support will you give to employers to ensure that their employees are well supported if they're experiencing ill health?
Our Keep Britain Working review, led by the former John Lewis boss, Sir Charlie Mayfield, is looking precisely at this issue. What more can we do to support employers to help give more opportunities for sick and disabled people to get work and to stay in work?
Sarah Sultana.
The Resolution Foundation has warned that cuts to PIP could see 620,000 people lose around £675 a month, hitting the poorest families hardest. With 870,000 children living in PIP-receiving households, 290,000 of whom are already living below the poverty line, how can the government justify pushing more disabled people and children into poverty instead of pursuing fairer alternatives such as a 2% wealth tax on assets over 10 million? This would raise 24 billion, 5 times as much as those proposed from these cuts. Is austerity 2.0 the change people really voted for?
Secretary of State.
Spending on working age sickness and disability benefits will still rise substantially over this Parliament. The full assessments of the numbers affected and by how much will be published alongside the Spring Statement.
Harpreet Uppal.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for her statement. Cuts to social security for disabled people under the previous government led to disabled people living in poverty with little or no increase in employment rates. So what assessments have been made on the impact of disabled people's income as a result of these changes, and will she make sure any reforms are compassionate and that disabled people have a voice in any changes?
Secretary of State.
Many honourable members have asked this. We will publish the equality impact and poverty impact analysis alongside the Spring Statement. I believe we need to treat people with dignity, respect and compassion, but we also have to face up to the challenges of a failing system that is currently not sustainable, not for the public finances, although that is true, but for the very people who will depend on this in future. That's what we're trying to change.
Dixon.
Deputy Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for reassuring Shipley constituents with profound disability that they will be protected under these reforms. My niece, who herself has autism and has faced significant barriers to work, is a health coach in a job centre locally. She's helping other people with disabilities, neurodiversity issues and mental illness to find work, but she's frustrated that she doesn't have access to the fit notes. Will the Secretary of State ensure that job centre staff have the time, information and resources they need to support people with disability and health problems to find suitable and rewarding jobs?
As always, my honourable friend absolutely hits the nail on the head. We actually want to free up our work coach time from tick box benefit administration, precisely so they can spend more time with sick and disabled people who need support, to refer them to mental health services, debt advice and others. When we have done that, we've shown more people get into work, Their finances improve, and so does their mental health. We've announced we already will free up 1,000 work coaches' time to help over 60,000 sick and disabled people. That is just the start. We want that rolled out right across the land.
Jen Craft.
Speaker, I am one of only 6 to 8% of people living with a serious mental illness in employment, despite 80% of us wanting to work. I am here despite a mental health system that I've always found unsupportive, and because I went out of my way to forge my own pathway of support and care. So while I welcome the Secretary of State's offer of a package of support, my plea to her is that she work with her colleagues in the Department of Health to make sure that those of us that suffer with a severe mental illness have the true support that we need to access employment.
My honourable friend is right. I believe, actually, one of the things we learned in the pandemic is a healthy nation and a healthy economy are two sides of the same coin. I believe there is much, much more we need to do to join up what the DWP does with what the NHS does, and crucially also with local skills and voluntary organisations. That isn't the way we've worked in the past, but that's what we want to change.
Terry Jeremy.
His adult life, my dad had a life-altering stroke in 2013. He was just 55. PIP kept him alive for 10 further years. As the person who helped fill in his PIP forms, take him to assessments and make the telephone calls, I can tell you without a doubt the system is already incredibly difficult to access. Will these reforms help speed up the process for PIP assessments and decisions, which take far too long in the current process?
Yes. What we've announced in the Green Paper is we're going to have a review, alongside the changes that we will legislate for, that we'll have a review of the assessment process, PIP process, led by my right honourable friend, the Minister for Social Security and Disability, working with disabled people, the organisations that represent them and others. We have got to sort this out, and I think this is one of the great tragedies. It is a miserable system for everybody. I don't want it to be like that. We need to change it. And I really look forward to talking to my honourable friend to get more of his ideas.
Sarah Coombs.
Labour believes in the value and dignity that having a job gives you, but too many disabled people who want a job are being let down and trapped by the current system. There are organisations such as Sweden and West Bromwich which helps people who have disabilities and long-term conditions into employment with the right tailored local support. So can I ask the Minister to confirm that this package of reforms is going to support people into good, fulfilling work via these local organisations, and we're going to protect those people with long-term conditions who will never be able to work?
Yes.
Natasha Irons.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The system is clearly broken, and I welcome the urgent work to get it fixed. But what reassurance can she provide for the children living in households receive PIP but also living in poverty? What reassurance can she provide for the 1 in 5 people in receipt of universal credit and disability benefit that are reliant on food banks already? And what reassurance can she give to my constituents, the 6,000 people of which claim PIP, that they need for dignified lives?
I know, having chaired Feeding Leicester for years, unfortunately I had to give it up when I got this job, I know only too well the issues people face right across my city and in the constituency she represents. Our objective here is for those who can work, to get them into good work, because that is the sustainable way to tackle poverty and inequality in this country. And we also have a commitment to a cross-government, bold child poverty strategy, which we hope to be publishing shortly.
Neil Duncan-Jordan.
Madam Deputy Speaker, being healthy is shaped by the world around us, from the homes we live in to the air we breathe and the money in our pockets. Would the Secretary of State therefore agree there is a moral case to tackle the social determinants of ill health and the causes of poverty, rather than cutting the benefits of the most vulnerable people in our society?
I mean, I worked in health, and my first job was actually on tackling health one of my first jobs on tackling health inequalities when I worked at the King's Fund charity. And that is precisely why we're looking not only at building more homes, but building more decent homes. Why we don't just want people to get jobs, but to get good jobs. It's why we're looking at raising the income of the poorest people with our new fair repayment rate, which gives on average £420 a year extra to the 1.2 million poorest families. There is much more that we can do, but right across government, our purpose is to tackle that poverty and inequality by getting more people into good jobs. That is the Labour way.
Johanna.
Deputy Speaker, I strongly congratulate the Secretary of State for the £1 billion package of employment support. Many active labour market policies have been shown to have considerable economic impact. Historically, it's been difficult for the OBR to score the positive impacts of active policies as opposed to the more straightforward impacts of budget reductions. Will the Secretary of State commit to working cross-departmentally to ensure that we have long-term investment in the health of our nation, which is so fundamental to the wealth of our economy?
Yes.
Lola McAvoy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I welcome the reforms outlined and the commitment to make sure that our most vulnerable disabled people are protected from these changes. In Darlington, we know the value of work, but I have come across constituents who have been out of work for a long time. They have been in work placements, they've got learning difficulties, they could work, but were badly bullied and have been scarred by 14 years of rhetoric around how they are work shy. What reassurances can the Minister and the Secretary of State give us that these people will be offered safe and secure placements in work?
I'm not interested in grabbing, blaming people to grab easy headlines. We've had that for too long. I know many people with autism and neurodivergent people who have been treated badly. That needs to change. If the Honourable Lady would like to send more case studies as an example in her constituency, I will look at that to see whatever we can do. We will try and put that right.
Ian Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many will see the removal of £5 billion from the social security system as not reforms but a continuation of the failed ideology of Tory austerity, which has already cost thousands of lives. That's why I've had hundreds of disabled constituents tell me they're absolutely terrified about what the government's planning to do. So does the Secretary of State really believe it is fair to balance the books on the backs of disabled people and the poor, rather than introducing a wealth on the super rich?
Just have to be honest, that's not what we're doing. I don't accept the status quo. I think it's miserable for people who can work and miserable for people who can't, and that's what I want to change.
Conor Naismith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for the tone she struck today in reflecting that we are talking about people's lives and not figures on a spreadsheet, and I hope to see that reflected in the delivery of these plans. But trust in these systems amongst disabled people is low, following 14 years of a failed punitive approach by the Conservative Party, and speculation in recent days has left my constituents feeling fearful. So what assurances can the Secretary of State give me that those with the most severe disabilities, those who are genuinely unable to work, will be no worse off under these plans?
I can absolutely give that commitment, and I just want to say this about an issue many honourable members have raised, which is about the culture of how they feel they've been treated or the headlines they see in the papers. It is really important we change that. I know that we can't do that overnight, but the entire team in the DWP, our ministers and also the officials know we want to change that so we can get people on a pathway to success.
Becky Cooper.
Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her statement. Welfare reform must hold responsibility for ensuring that incentivising people into work does not produce unintended health consequences, not least, as she rightly points out, by generating fear and uncertainty. Would the Minister therefore agree that we need to address the health inequity issues that are delaying treatment of mental illness and our underlying public health and inequality issues? Welfare reform and NHS transformation must complement each other to make sure that no one is left behind.
I absolutely agree that we need to tackle these issues, but I just would say this. There is more and more evidence that good work is good for mental health, for people with anxiety and depression and those with serious conditions, if that support is done in the right way. I have seen it for myself in my own constituency from the work that the NHS is doing. We've got to spread that far more widely.
Lizzie Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We know that helping people stay well, managing long-term conditions or disabilities almost always is cheaper in the long term. Can the Secretary of State tell me how she will account for the potential wider system costs of changing any money that is available to people with disabilities or long-term conditions?
So for many years before I was appointed in opposition as Shadow DWP, I worked in health and social care. And I know that actually helping people to manage their own long-term conditions is absolutely essential, where we give people power, control and agency over their lives rather than telling them somehow the doctor or somebody else always knows best. That is a principle I deeply believe in, and it's something that I will work closely with my Right Honourable friend, the Health Secretary, on. I know he believes that too. There's much more we can do, but we will definitely make a start.
I will get everybody in, I think, at this rate. Kirsten Sullivan, thank you.
Deputy Speaker, I recently held a child poverty roundtable in my constituency of Bathgate and Linlithgow, and one of the issues raised repeatedly was that many people who want to work find themselves worse off when they lose benefits and find themselves pushed into hardship. So what assurances can my Right Honourable friend provide my constituent that under these changes they will be better off in work and they'll no longer be penalised for wanting to improve their life circumstances and those of their families?
My friend raises a really important point, and I would say it would be really good if she could talk to my Right Honourable friend, the Minister for Social Security and Disability, who is reviewing universal credit, as we promised in our manifesto, to tackle poverty and make work pay. We have got to make that a reality for everybody in this country, and I'm sure if she talks to him, he will talk more about what we're doing in this regard.
Sarah Smith.
Last week, my constituent Ellie, who's visually impaired, visited the local job centre. In that experience, as a full-time student seeking part-time work, she was belittled, she was spoken over, she was told that she couldn't get help because she was on PIP and not on UC, and she left feeling devastated by that experience. Can the Secretary of State reassure me and her that this experience will become a thing of the past for people like her desperately seeking work?
That is absolutely my intention, and I would ask my honourable friend, can you send me the details, because I will look into it personally.
John Slinger.
Deputy Speaker, does my right honourable friend agree that the clue is in the name of our party, because we believe in dignity in work, enhanced workers' rights, dignity and far more support for disabled people and people with health conditions seeking work, particularly with the right to try, dignity and compassion for those unable to work, especially ending reassessments, and that it's this Labour government that will get Britain working, get welfare working better, with compassion and support at its heart.
Yeah. Very much agree with my honourable friend's sentiments. I don't pretend this will change overnight. I know it is a huge agenda, but we're in politics to make a difference, and a big difference, because, as I said, life's short and we've got much we need to do.
Antonia Bands.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many of us in this place have fought alongside the parents of severely disabled people, not least against our broken SEND system. Can the Secretary of State reassure those parents who may be looking at the proposed changes to the UC Health eligibility for under 22s and feeling deeply dismayed right now?
I want to say to my honourable friend, while we are consulting on this proposal, we want to make sure those severely disabled who will never work will be protected on that. But I also know that there are many young people with special educational needs and learning difficulties who, with the right support, can make a contribution, live independently and get work. I am working closely with my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, to get this right, because it's really important that we ensure all young people get the support and opportunities they deserve.
Polly Billington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend will know that the Tory legacy in coastal communities like mine in East Thanet is a broken welfare system and a broken economy. The number of people claiming PIP has more than doubled in my constituency since 2018, and the statistics on young people claiming for mental health conditions are particularly heartbreaking. But two things can be true at once. Too many people are being written off without a path to wellness and work, and there must be reliable support for those who can't work. Can my right honourable friend explain how reducing support for those who struggle to wash and dress themselves will help tackle either of these challenges?
My right honourable friend, as always, speaks passionately about her constituency and the need to make sure that the support for people who can work is there, but also that we protect those. I would say every case needs to be judged on an individual basis. We will make sure that that happens. And may I say to the House and Madam Deputy Speaker, I know many people would have wanted to ask more questions and to say more. My door is always open. We want and need to get this right. We'll have more debates about this, but if any honourable member on either of the side of the House wants to contact me with more questions, myself and the team will do everything we can to address these openly, honestly and quickly.
And the final question from the backbench is Chris Vince.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I thank the Secretary of State for her statement today. I think we all know that the current system is not only broken, it's also unsustainable, and I welcome her focus on supporting the long-term unemployed, and I would point to some good examples of work we're doing in my constituency of Harlow. Would she, however, agree that we need to support those constituents in Harlow, many with severe disabilities, who cannot work, and end this merry-go-round of constant reassessment?
Saving the best till last, as always, for the honourable gentleman for Harlow. We absolutely will protect those with severe disabilities who can never work, and I don't want to see them having to go through reassessments that are deeply worrying to people. We want to put that right, and for people in Harlow who can work but have been denied the opportunities, we'll fix the broken system, tackle the perverse incentives that we were left by the Conservatives, and give people hope and opportunity that there are better days ahead.
That concludes the statements, and can I just let members know that there's been around 100 members who've asked questions on that statement.